Now, as South Africans brace themselves for possibly another interest rate decision, there are several factors that are taken into account here. And of course, you'd understand one of those is the Bureau for Economic Research's Inflation Expectation Survey. And it says that the headline CPI inflation expectations of analysts, business people and trade unions seemingly peaked in the second quarter of 2023. Now, as these expectations declined significantly in the third quarter. Let's look at what all of this now means as we look, of course, ahead, and given what is also happening around the economy in the country. We've got our economics editor, Tshepo Mongoai, who's joining us live now. Tshepo, what does all of this mean?
Well, it's very much important for the Reserve Bank, who would be sitting next week to decide on the next interest rate move and see whether inflation remains a threat. Remember, the outlook by the business people, by labor unions and analysts, it actually speaks to the decisions that they make in their various constituencies. It could be households and so forth. So if business people expect inflation to continue to rise above 6%, and if unions expect the same, surely it means that the unions will be bargaining for higher wages in the next year. And if indeed they will be demanding above inflation rates, it means that this will sustain high inflation for quite some time. And inflation could be more broad-based in the economy. And the duty of the Reserve Bank is to ensure that it's not generalized as such. So they will have to act accordingly as long as there is a general expectations of a high inflation going forward. But what we are seeing now is that inflation is expected to come down. Those views indicates that they do expect it to come down slightly, and that could perhaps help the Reserve Bank in deciding either not to hike, keep interest rates where they are, and maybe eventually, as we go into next year, consider reducing the lending rate for as long as there is no expectation of high inflation.
And this happens as a lot of people were hoping that next week might bring some good news, and we see either not even the rate staying the same, but others were hoping that things possibly start coming down. But there's another interesting story that I saw over the course of the weekend and today as well, and that is around the loan. The conversation around the loan at Eskom, and you think about the fact that reports suggesting that the German Development Bank, for example, KfW, has offered around $214 million to Eskom, and this of course is for the development of the transmission grid in the Northern Cape as well as the Western Cape provinces. Tshepo, this is not the first time we're talking about a loan. In fact, the Eskom needs a lot of money, over 200 million rand, to upgrade its grid in order to allow independent power producers to connect. But this dates back to 2015 when KfW actually gave money to Eskom in order to upgrade their infrastructure, and they keep on coming. And this just adds to a very long list of lenders that Eskom has actually been speaking to, and they've got a lot of money from them. And at that time, it was not fashionable to talk about the grid configuration when this deal happened. It had a grace period of 5 years, so that was in 2015. So they would have maybe started paying that loan last year or so. And obviously, we know that push-up interest if you have got that loan. And one thing that is also interesting is that Eskom doesn't tend to give much details about the conditions of their loans, and they keep it under wrap. And one wonders, because we all know that Eskom doesn't really have a strong balance sheet. They always rely on the Minister of Finance to do something. At some point, in fact, this
institutions who did not want to extend further loans to Eskom, and it's not for the first time. And the Minister of Finance will have to look at in his kitty, see if he can give them a little bit of money so that the lenders can start engaging with Eskom on further loans, because they need money in order to go. But the question is, what happened? Is there a proper explanation in terms of all these loans that have been extended? Yes, some of them dates during the state capture, but if indeed some of the money did not go where it was intended to go, I think it's very important that the people of South Africa understand and know that, because Eskom, it's still going to go to the market and ask for money to expand their grid. And we need to ask what happened to the previous loans. I mean, there was a 6 billion rand loan for the same purpose that was also, I think it was AFD, the French agency, development agency, that gave them money to upgrade the grid. Yes, there are IPPs that have since connected to the grid. I think more than 70 have connected, but there must be clear accountability of whether the money is there, and whether all the money was used for that particular project, or some of it did not, because I doubt if things are clean as one expect, and that is why the issue around the exemption of the PFMA at Eskom raises such a lot of questions around it, if indeed this money goes to where it's supposed to be.
Tshepo, and especially when you think about the fact that a lot of South Africans listening to us talk about this, yet in recent days we saw Stage 6 make a comeback, and they're wondering, with all of this money, with all of what's going on, can we see the end to load shedding? But let's leave it there with you. Thank you so much for coming through, and as we talk about some of these important issues, that is our economics editor, Tshepo Mongoai.